Russian propaganda has long played a central role in the state's domestic and international political strategy. Whether during the Soviet era or under the leadership of Vladimir Putin in the 21st century, the Russian state has invested heavily in crafting narratives that support its geopolitical goals, reinforce internal control, and disrupt adversarial cohesion. Propaganda in Russia is not only a tool of persuasion, but also a means of information warfare, psychological influence, and strategic disinformation. This essay explores the major topics and qualities of Russian propaganda, considering its historical evolution, narrative themes, rhetorical techniques, and digital dissemination. Historical background. Soviet foundations. The roots of Russian propaganda can be traced to the early days of the Soviet Union. Bolshevik leaders, particularly Lenin, viewed propaganda as essential to ideological indoctrination and social transformation. Agencies like Glavlit and Agitprop regulated publishing, censored dissenting voices, and produced ideological content for the masses. Key tools included posters, cinema, public education, and press outlets such as Pravda. The central goals were to legitimize communist rule, glorify the Soviet state, demonize enemies, e.g. Western imperialism, and engineer the new Soviet man. Transition after 1991. Following the collapse of the USSR, the Russian Federation entered a chaotic and ideologically ambiguous period. The state apparatus weakened, and propaganda temporarily declined in prominence. However, with the rise of Vladimir Putin in the 2000s, there was a resurgence in state-directed messaging. Drawing lessons from the past while embracing digital platforms, Russia developed a hybrid system that mixed authoritarian control with postmodern media tactics. Nashhat. Major topics of Russian propaganda. Russian propaganda covers a wide range of domestic and international themes. The topics often shift depending on geopolitical priorities, but some consistent patterns can be identified. 1. Anti-Western sentiment. A core pillar of Russian propaganda is portraying the West, especially the United States, NATO, and the EU, as aggressive, decadent, hypocritical, and morally corrupt. Key messages include: NATO expansion is a threat to Russian sovereignty. The US orchestrates color revolutions and regime change. Western liberalism undermines traditional values and national identity. Sanctions and criticism are part of a larger anti-Russian conspiracy. This anti-Western rhetoric seeks to mobilize domestic unity against a common enemy while justifying foreign policy assertiveness, Russian victimhood, and exceptionalism. Another dual narrative is that of victimhood and exceptionalism. Russia is depicted as historically misunderstood and unfairly targeted by the West, a bastion of spiritual depth, cultural richness, and moral clarity, the inheritor of a unique civilizational mission to defend traditional values and multipolarity. This allows propaganda to both evoke sympathy and assert moral superiority. 3. Militarism and national pride. Propaganda frequently glorifies Russia's military might, historical victories, especially World War II, and technological achievements. Key examples include annual Victory Day parades as symbolic reminders of Russian heroism, emphasis on new generation weapon systems like hypersonic missiles, portrayals of Russian soldiers as noble protectors of the homeland. Militarism is tightly connected with national pride, reinforcing the image of a strong and self-sufficient Russia. 4. Moral conservatism and traditional values. Russian state narratives often oppose liberal and progressive social values. Propaganda frames Russia as a defender of Orthodox Christianity and family structures, gender norms and heterosexuality, patriotism over cosmopolitanism. This theme is not only aimed at domestic audiences, but is also exported to conservative groups abroad, creating alliances with populist movements in Europe and the United States. 5. Demonization of internal enemies. Propaganda also targets perceived internal threats: opposition leaders, independent journalists, NGOs, and minority groups. Common tactics include framing dissidents as foreign agents or traitors, equating protests with Western-backed coups, as seen in Ukraine, using discrediting techniques, smear campaigns, and selective footage. The aim is to delegitimize alternative political narratives and neutralize resistance. Svrk 6. Ukraine and the near abroad. Since the annexation of Crimea in 2014, and especially after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, propaganda has intensified its focus on Ukraine. Main messages include: Ukraine is a failed state or Nazi-led regime. Russia is engaged in a liberation mission to protect Russian speakers. The conflict is part of a broader struggle against NATO aggression. Other former Soviet states like Georgia, Moldova, and the Baltic states are also frequently featured in narratives of Russophobia and Western manipulation. Core qualities and strategies. Russian propaganda exhibits several defining characteristics that distinguish it from traditional political messaging. 1. Multi-layered messaging. Hybrid narrative structures. Russian propaganda is not monolithic. It often includes multiple, even contradictory messages designed to confuse rather than convince. This postmodern approach undermines trust in objective truth and fosters cynicism. For example, claiming simultaneously that no invasion occurred and that it was provoked, promoting conspiracy theories alongside state-aligned facts, questioning Western narratives not by offering a counter-narrative, but by casting doubt on the possibility of truth. This strategy is sometimes described as fire hose of falsehood. Tamlar 2. Weaponization of information, information warfare. Propaganda in Russia is part of a broader doctrine of hybrid warfare, where psychological, cyber, and media operations complement military activity. Tactics include coordinated disinformation campaigns on social media, deepfake technology and synthetic media, amplification of fringe or radical voices in Western societies, exploiting societal divisions, e.g. race, migration, class, to destabilize. Such efforts aim to weaken adversaries from within and distort the global information space. Step 3. State media control and centralization. The Kremlin maintains tight control over major TV stations, news agencies, and online platforms. Outlets like RT, Russia Today, and Sputnik serve as international propaganda tools, while domestically, channels such as Channel One reinforce state narratives. Techniques include framing, emphasizing certain interpretations over others; agenda setting, prioritizing some issues while ignoring others; emotional appeal, using fear, pride, or anger to mobilize viewers. Independent media is often marginalized or forced into exile. Shaber 4. Mimicry and parody. Russian propaganda frequently mimics the language form of Western journalism or political critique. Satirical or ironic formats are used to ridicule liberal values, democracy, or international institutions. This creates the impression of sophistication and pluralism while smuggling in ideological content. Matter 5. Memetic warfare and internet culture. Modern Russian propaganda embraces internet culture, memes, trolling, viral videos, and comment brigades. This includes use of troll farms, e.g. Internet Research Agency, to spread disinformation, bots on Twitter and Telegram to sway public discourse, gamification and humor to appeal to younger audiences. This allows propaganda to blend into popular culture and avoid traditional censorship filters. Case studies. 1. Crimea annexation, 2014. After Russian troops occupied Crimea, state media quickly justified the act as a historical correction and a response to NATO aggression. The term "Crimea is ours," Krimnash, became a viral nationalist slogan. Propaganda portrayed the annexation as peaceful, democratic, via the contested referendum, and protective of Russian-speaking populations. Number 2. MH17 plane crash, 2014. When Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 was shot down over eastern Ukraine, Russian media immediately launched multiple contradictory theories. Ukrainian military shot it down. It was intended as a provocation. It was a case of mistaken identity. This typifies the strategy of spreading doubt and delaying international consensus. 3. COVID-19 disinformation. During the pandemic, Russian outlets circulated conspiracies about vaccine safety, Western pharmaceutical companies, and the origins of the virus. Simultaneously, Russia promoted its own Sputnik V vaccine as a superior alternative. The goal was to erode trust in Western institutions and assert Russian scientific leadership. Domestic function, controlling the narrative. Within Russia, propaganda reinforces authoritarian stability by creating a sense of national unity in opposition to external threats, distracting from economic hardship, corruption, or political repression, redefining loyalty as support for state narratives rather than truth. This is facilitated by the education system, religious institutions, especially the Russian Orthodox Church, and loyalty oaths in state institutions. International function, projection of influence. Globally, propaganda aims to legitimize Russian foreign policy actions, undermine Western democratic cohesion, build soft power alliances with populist, conservative, or authoritarian movements, promote the idea of a multipolar world where Russia is a great power equal to the US or China. Russia's engagement with African, Latin American, and Middle Eastern audiences through RT and diplomatic narratives reflects this ambition. Criticisms and challenges. Despite its sophistication, Russian propaganda faces limitations. It often fails to persuade skeptics outside its sphere of influence. Over-reliance on disinformation can erode its own credibility. Repression of independent media creates a feedback loop and reduces critical evaluation. The Ukraine war led to increased international scrutiny, sanctions, and platform bans, e.g., RT removed from EU airwaves. Nevertheless, in a fragmented and polarized world, propaganda often succeeds not by convincing, but by confusing and demobilizing opposition. Conclusion. Russian propaganda is a complex, adaptive, and multidimensional system. It blends Soviet legacies with modern media tactics, traditional values with digital innovation, and domestic control with international disruption. Its effectiveness lies not in converting hearts and minds, but in sowing doubt, weakening adversaries, and reinforcing the state's vision of power and identity. As global information ecosystems evolve, understanding the structure and function of Russian propaganda remains vital for resisting manipulation and defending democratic discourse.